Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. We're glad you decided to check us out. God has a specific message of hope for your life and mine today. So listen up.
Faith is a name. Faith is a label for someone's religious beliefs. Faith is trust in a friend. Faith is belief in yourself. With so many definitions of faith in so many contexts, it's no wonder that sometimes
the truth is that
we get
in our
a little
society,
fuzzy
when you translate from one language to another, we talk about this often. There's not just a one-to-one correlation always from one language to another. And we take this concept that we call faith, and we use this all over in our society, right? You talk about someone's faith, from a political sense. There's a political sense to that. There's a religious sense to that, which is what it's really about. There's faith is, when you're going for the job interview, and faith is, just have a little faith in yourself. You can do it. You hear these things. We say these things to friends. Is when you're, the last kick of the football game. You're sitting there and you're waiting. And is he going to kick that game-winning field goal? Things like that. That's it. That you want to have a little faith. How many times have you ever looked at your friend and said, "Hey, have a little faith. It's going to work." Well, a lot of times when we use faith for so many reasons, and we're really a culture of hyperbole and analogy and illustration. So we take things and we apply principles or parts of that thing in loads of different places. And when we do that with the word faith, it's very similar. I mean, it's very common. I would think it would be very expected that somehow the word faith can kind of get diluted. If you've ever, and that can be a problem. I mean, how many people have ever drunk tea? Do you like tea? All right. How many people like strong tea? Yes, I like strong tea. How many people who like strong tea reached out for a glass of tea and got some weak tea that was really diluted in water, and you drank it and you hated every second of it? Yes, I've been there. I hate that. And sometimes that can be difficult. Sometimes you go, and I think that's what happens sometimes with the word faith. When you dilute it with all these other meanings and stuff, you can get away from what it really is. And from time to time, if there's anybody who should get what faith is, it should be people that follow Jesus. That would be right. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. All these references to faith that we have in the Bible. So this is important for us to understand. Last week we talked about some things that faith is. And we're talking about that in this series. Last week we talked about faith as a gift. And that's it is evidence. It says in Hebrews 11 that God gave. It said that it's evidence of things that are not seen, and that God gave us this gift. In other words, you think, it's just okay. I can sit down on this chair and I can believe that it's going to be there. I can just sit down without a care or worry and know that it's not going to fall on the floor or explode when I hit there, or disintegrate, or I don't know, whatever. You think that's just something you're normally able to do. But the truth is that is most abnormal for a physical being to be able to take, that's made of sensors and all these nerves and hearing that you can do, and your eyes and your brain that is probably the greatest single supercomputer, it's not probably, it is, that's ever seen, because of all the data that it has to process just millisecond by millisecond. When I look at it, you guys, and I see all the different colors of shirts and stuff like this, and the chairs and the light up here and all these type of things, my eyes are transmitting data to my brain, and it's just faster than I could snap. It's making all these calculations. They're faster than any supercomputer that we have ever seen to give us information on how to deal with our surroundings. This is all, your physical body is made to be all about taking in stuff that you can touch, taste, hear, feel, see, and making sense of it. What it's not made for, in a lot of ways, is to take something you can't see, and you can't touch, and you can't taste, and you can't hear, and take that in and deal with that. And the fact that you can be able to do that very abnormal thing, what the Bible says in Hebrews 11:1, is that faith that you have is the evidence of things unseen. In other words, the fact that you can possibly conceive to believe in something that you can't have empirical data on is the truth that there are things that are beyond your natural. In other words, that's part of a proof of God. It's the evidence of things unseen. That's what faith is. We talked about faith last week. He said, when you start to believe in a God that you can't see, you will begin to see things that you can't believe. And we talked about some people in the Bible, and we'll be talking about some characters over this. We talked about Noah last week and how, it never rained before. And God said, hey, build a boat because it's going to rain so much. And Noah's like, what's rain? Water fall from the sky? Are you crazy? There's no evidence that had happened before. Noah began to build a boat, right? And not only that, build this giant boat. And all these animals are going to walk up to you and go into it. Oh, yeah, really? That's going to happen? Okay, all right. Well, and so he invests a big chunk of his life in doing this crazy thing that no one ever seen before. And what happened? He saw what he could not believe. Because rain fell, flooded the earth. Here all the animals came. They're all in there. They're not eating each other. They're at the end of this. And he makes it through. And all the ramifications of that. Now, faith is a gift. The fact that you can believe in something that you can't empirically prove is a gift in itself from God. But today I want to talk about something else. There's something else that faith is. Faith is a weapon. You ever think about that? Faith is a weapon. I want to read to you something. You maybe not thought about that before. Faith is a weapon. We don't think about that. If you talk about someone's faith, it's about how nice they're supposed to be, and that's not damaging. Weapons are damaging. Weapons are bad. We don't need to talk about them. We don't bite on your Pop-Tart in school and make it into the shape of a gun, or we're going to send you home. With a weapon, that's a bad thing, right? But I'm going to tell you, faith is a weapon, and I want you to look at Hebrews chapter 11. If you got your Bibles, turn to Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to flip to a couple of places in the Bible. If you don't have it, it's okay. You can look on the screen. If you got your smart device, if you got your phone, no big deal. If that's where your Bible is, hey, nobody's going to crucify you for pulling it out and reading it. I just want you to read it. Unroll your scroll. I don't care what it is. Just read the thing, okay? That's the deal. All right? But we're going to read about something, what God says about faith. This Hebrews 11, the whole chapter there is kind of like the Hall of Faith. You got Hall of Fame for NFL in Canton, Ohio. You got Hall of Fame in basketball. And like I said, they even got Hall of Fame for worldwide, for professional wrestling, man. So this is the Hall of Faith. This is what this is. But in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32, I want you to read here with me. And Brian's saying, what more shall I say? See, what he's been doing is naming off all these dudes that are in the Hall of Faith. Like, this guy had faith, and he did this, and she did this, and he did this, and then she did this, and this was amazing. He did all these things. Says, what more did I say? I don't have enough time. So I do not have time to tell about Gideon, and Barak, and Samson, and Jephthah, and about David, and Samuel, and the prophets. That's a pretty hefty list. If you want to check it out sometime, you go Google some of those names, or just do a Bible search if you got your phone and see who that is, because you're talking about Barak he's an ancient military leader and ruler. You're talking about Samson. Oh, for Pete's sake, he's like the Jewish superhero. He's like the Jewish Superman or whatever. You've got like Gideon. Now, Gideon, you got to understand Gideon, and you need to go read that story, okay? It's easy. Find it, Google it, and go read it. Read the Bible. Don't read what somebody else said about it. You go read it first. Read that first. But look, Gideon beat an army of tens of thousands of people, all right, with 300 dudes armed with pottery and musical instruments. Pottery and musical instruments. And you know how he got his confirmation that he was doing the right thing? It's about a dream, about a giant loaf of bread rolling down a hill. That doesn't sound like the type of dream that normally you would think someone would have. That sounds like a drug industry dream, but it's really not. And it's how he got his deal. These are some amazing guys that took God at His word and followed Him under some crazy circumstances and situations. I want to look what they did. Who through faith, not through armies, not through weapons, not through swords or whatever, it says who through faith conquered kingdoms. Faith conquered kingdoms. Faith administered justice. Gained what was promised. Look at this. Who shut the mouths of lions through faith. I saw a video the other day of some dude some sheriff in South Florida, taking on a gator. It's not a huge gator, but any gator for me. that gets past like this far is a huge gator, right? And he's trying, and this dude, the gator is in someone's driveway. And he's trying to get the gator, and so he's tapping the gator on the nose, and he's trying to get behind it, and he pulls it up, and he sits down on top of it finally from the back and gets his hands around the jaws, and they wrap the mouth up and shut it, Faith shut the mouth of lions. Now, I imagine lions are a little bit tougher than gators, but continue on. In verse 33, it says, verse 34, it said it can quench the fury of the flames. Faith as a fire extinguisher. You ever thought about that? Quench the fury of the flames. Escape the edge of the sword. Save your life. We want to talk about the shield of faith. Well, that's real, man. Escape the edge of the sword. Who's through faith, whose weakness, get this, whose weakness was turned into strength. How many people would like your weaknesses to be turned into strengths? The stuff that you struggle with, that give you a hard time, that get you into trouble, that you fail at continually. That job that you just can't get over, that career you just can't get past, that class that just doesn't seem, you can't understand it, that's a weakness for you. Through faith, whose weakness was turned to strength, who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. All of this, not through the nuclear weapons or whatever, but the weapon, the thing that they described that they did what they did was through faith. Faith is a weapon. And what I want to focus on is one dude in verse 32 that they talked about is David. I skipped over him purposely because I'm going to talk back about him. But there's a story about David. It's a pretty famous one, and probably everybody in here has heard this. It's a story about David and Goliath, David and a giant, right? Well, I'm going to kind of set it up. If you hadn't heard it, you've been around church much, you've probably heard it. You've been out, you've probably heard the name mentioned. You may have some semblance of what it means. But we're going to get everybody on the same basis. I'm going to go back and just tell you a little bit about the story real quick. And then we're going to talk about something that faith shows up in the story. So the backstory of David, pretty much of this story, pretty much is the Philistine army, which is a rival nation. They always seem to be against, they're kind of like Alabama and Auburn, they're the Auburn, they're the bad guys, Alabama the good guys. Okay, Israelites and, Israelites and the Philistines, that's kind of how it works, right? I'm an Alabama fan, in case you didn't figure that out, you know it now. Okay, all right. So they have come together and they're on a hill. The Philistines are going to come get the Israelites. So they muster their army up on a hill, and there's a big valley, and the Israelites, they get King Saul, he gets all his guys, and they load up on the top of the hill, and here's the Philistines on this side, and here's the Israelites on this side, and in this valley is in between them. And they're just like posing and showing off, and I guess whatever. We're showing our force. And so there's this guy named Goliath. And what he would do, I want to read a little bit about Goliath here in 1 Samuel chapter 17. If you want to turn there and read your Bible with me, that's cool. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 17. But we got it on the screen as well. It says, Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. 2 feet taller than Shaq. Dude, I'm telling you, it's huge. He wore a bronze helmet and a bronze coat of mail that weighed 125 pounds. His coat weighed 125 pounds. You know anybody who weighs 125 pounds? That's what the coat weighed. Anyway, so he also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. In verse 7, it says, the shaft of the spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, and it tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. Iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. When I was younger, I used to, I worked out with dumbbells. My first dumbbell I was working out with were 17.6 pounds. I had two 8.8s in a bar, maybe a little bit more than that. But so, that's huge. That's heavy. And so the end of this long stick that he's carrying and using. Now I want you to understand something. Like if you and I think about a spearhead, I also think about an arrow, a head like that. An arrowhead is less than an ounce. Most of your arrowheads that you'll ever see on the end of an arrow are less than an ounce. And this thing was 15 pounds. How many ounces in a pound? 16. So you do the math, because I'm not going to waste time doing it or pull out my phone. So anyway, so his armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. This dude is a huge, imposing figure. And you got to understand, he comes out of the ranks on the side of this hill. He comes down in the side of the hill every day, it said, and he would make this challenge. He said, look, I will fight anybody you got, and if you beat me in one-on-one combat, all of my army, all of these dudes up here, we will be your slaves and serve you for the rest of our lives. But if I beat your guy, you will be our slaves and serve us. That's a lot on the line. But you know, it's not so much on the line when you got a dude that's 9 feet tall that you have to fight. And nobody really wanted to do it. Can you shock me? Shock me on that one? Nobody really wants to. I would like to go fight the 9-foot tall guy. I mean, Shaq wouldn't even fight the 9-foot tall guy. Oh my goodness. Half the linemen that you see in the NFL would be coming up to here on the dude. You know, I mean, it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. And understandably so. They did not want to fight this guy. So here Jesse, who's David's dad, his 3 older brothers are serving in the army, right? So David's staying at home taking care of the sheep and stuff, right? And so Jesse says to David, look, you need to take your brothers some food, because they've been out there a pretty long while because nobody wants to fight Goliath. And to be honest, you know, I think they're thinking, you know, if we get them to fight one guy and we win with one guy, it's less casualties or whatever. I don't know. They're standing off against each other. The Philistines were powerful. I don't think anybody really wanted to fight toward it. I think they did. I don't think the Israelites really wanted to get into it. But it was thrust upon them. So he says, hey, David, here, go take some food out to your brothers. So they go out to the battlefield. He takes food out to their brothers, happens to be there while the dude's coming out. And so David, who's like a teenager at the time, you know, pretty much traditionally thought of as, he goes there and he hears the dude make his challenge. And like a teenager, he goes, what? I can't believe that. I will take him on. Y'all hold me back. And that's kind of his whole MO by that. I will fight him. And so the king, Saul, who knows David, and then the commander brings him over David to Saul, and he says that, and he goes, no. You don't need to do that. Because, see, dude, you're just a youth. And he's like a man. And not just a man, but he's like a man. Like a man I can't reach, man. You can't fight him and win because, in other words, I'm not going to bank my freedom on your fighting skill, young man. I don't care how much stuff you got going on inside of you. I don't know. And David's like, look, so he comes with this impassioned plea. And through this, somehow, I don't know, this is nuts. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I got this for you. Matthew, you come to me, you want to fight a 9-foot guy and freedom of the rest of my life depends on it? No, I'm not going to do it, man. I love you, but I'm not going to do that. No, so anyway, you know, I just don't trust you that much. I don't, man. That's huge. I'm not going to do it. But somehow Saul says, hey, I'm going to let you do this. And so he gives him his armor. And you know the story about the armor, if you've been around too much. He gives him the armor. David puts it on and he said, look, I don't know what to do with this. You know, I've never done anything and all this junk, you know. So I can't fight him in that, which is pretty smart because you're going against a guy that's 9 feet tall and carries around something that just one part of his weapon is 125 pounds. So look, if he gets you, you're done. It's pretty much over, right? You know, it's not going to take many legs to me. He hit you and you sunk 6 feet in the ground. That's what's going down. So anyway, so he goes out, and this is the weapons that he chooses. You remember this? He chooses a slingshot that he uses to protect the sheep and animals. And he gets 5 smooth stones, I guess so they'll fly pretty good. And he goes out to meet Goliath, you know, like this. And you know how the story goes, right? You know, he gets up there and Goliath's like, I can't believe you're sending this guy out here. I'm going to cut your hat off and feed you to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. You're a body to that. And David makes this big statement. He says, look, you know, I've come and serve the Lord of hosts, and today I will kill you and I will cut your head off. It's not what I want coming out of the mouth of my teenager. But I will kill you, I will cut your head off, and I will show everybody who I serve that God is greater than anything. And so he comes in the name of the Lord. And you know what happens? He winds up, he throws the rock, hits him right in the middle of the head. You know, says it sinks into his head, and Goliath, boom, deader than a doorknob right there. And David, true to his word, he goes over and takes Goliath's own sword and cuts his head off with his own sword. That's worse. That's bad. So he takes somebody else's. I'm going to take your sword. I'm going to cut your own head off. And so he cuts his head off to make sure he's dead. And so that's the battle, right? Well, I want to focus on something today. You might think that, man, that guy must have been like some kind of expert slingshot dude, right? Wow, I took stone. I mean, that's amazing. Just some 5 stones. And you might even think, why did he take 5? You think he's going to miss? No, people said that, Goliath had 4 brothers, so he was loading up for them in case they came after him. I'm ready. I'm going to take this dude out. I'm going to be ready if those guys come running from somewhere. I'm going to take them too. I'm going to go matrix them. But anyway, but I want you to think about this. It's not the weapons that he took that they were so powerful, because I think the significance of the weapons are the insignificance of the weapons. You see, because I'm not going to go, I got news for you. If I'm going to fight someone who's 9 feet tall and twice my size and is much more experienced than I am, I'm going to get a weapon that's very powerful to make up for my own inadequacies and weaknesses. Yet what God led him to do was to pick up an inadequate weapon and defeat a very adequate giant. I want to show you how David feels about weapons. And I think you can see it in his story, but I think it's even more said in a psalm that we're all familiar with, Psalm 23. I want to read Psalm 23, verse 4 and 5. And I got it right up here. I'll read it real quick for you. It says, this is David, very famous. It says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. Why? Because I've got a rock? No. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Okay? The stuff you have, your weapons, your stuff that you give me, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I want you to imagine that. You've got a whole army of enemies in front of you, and you are so confident in the Lord that He will prepare a table for you to sit down and eat at, and you will sit there and eat in their presence, and no, they ain't going to do a daggone thing to you because you are with me. He says, you anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. But I want you to think about what David said about the rod and the staff. It's not the rod and the staff win the battle. It's not the rod and the staff destroy the enemy, because they're in the presence after the rod and the staff. The rod and the staff, they comfort me. I think a lot of times that the biggest thing that we forget is the reason that he was so confident and the reason that he was able to meet Goliath on those terms with, I don't think it really mattered. I think he could have picked up a lot of Play-Doh or something. I don't think it really mattered what the weapon was so much. But he trusted God and had faith in him on that, is that you are with me. See, when God gives us a rod and a staff, they're to comfort us. When God gives you the ability to do something, when God gives you a weapon in this life, when God gives you something to do, that's for God. That's for you to comfort yourself. That's for him to comfort you. Let me give you an object lesson what it's like. Okay? You might know what these are. Fidget spinner, right? Fidget spinner. You like those?
No.
That's for people that, kids, who need to, it's called, what do they call it? Self-regulation tool, so that you can focus on that, so that you really keep your attention and know what you're doing and do your work, right? That's what it's about. It's a fidget thing. Fidget spinner, right? That's something for you to concentrate on and comfort you, and when things are getting a little fidgety, where you can pay attention and listen, right? I'm going to tell you that the talents and abilities that you have are a lot like this fidget spinner. These are not going to win the battle. But these are something that I can focus on and focus my attention on and work on and do so that I can focus on God better. You realize that? It's like a fidget spinner that's useful. That's what I want you to think about when you talk about the sling and the stone. Right? But see, here's how you and I do it. We look at whatever sling and stone that God has given us, right? And we think, if I am good enough with this sling and this stone, that I will win the day. And when this rod and this staff has won the day, then I will sit down with God and he will comfort me. You think, because if I work hard enough at my job and I make enough money, at the end of the day, God will comfort me. If I raise good enough kids, that reflect well back on me, or that do a good enough job in their jobs, and I feel like I've done the job because I've poured all my energy into it, then the Lord will sit down and comfort me. If I achieve this status within my circle of friends, if I gain this award and put all this talent that God's given me toward this award, and I do this, and I do this, and I do this, at some point at the end of the day, when I've won the award, then God and I will sit down and He will comfort me. And what we do is we get the things backwards. Because your talents and your abilities and your rod and your staff were never meant to bring you salvation. That's God. They're just meant to comfort you and focus you in the middle of it, right? And what's really cool is sometimes the talents that God gives you, the fidget spinners God gives you, they're not just worthless that just sit there and just keep you going. You focus on these things, you work on your talents, and God will help you, let you use these. As part, He said, I'll give you a part in this. I'm going to do it, but I will help you. I will use you. I will use you to do this. So I will make your fidget spinner useful. I know you teachers are out there saying that's impossible. There is no way to make a fidget spinner useful, but with God, all things are possible. You have to understand that your mind and your brain and your things and your wit and your mouth and your ability and your stuff is not the weapon that God wants you to use to conquer life. It's faith in Him. All of these things, when you look through the Bible, I tell you this all the time, the Bible is what you can expect from God, and it's what God expects from you. And all these crazy, weird stories that you read about in the Bible, and you should go read some of them. I mean, you should go Google a lot of those guys and read those stories. You know, there's some wacko stories in the Old Testament. And there's just stuff that's like, what? What? I mean, there's loads of those. The reason that God put them in there is not just to be some kind of weird thing, but He put them in there so that you and I can understand that look at all these weird things that God has been able to do. I can trust Him to handle my junk. I don't have to try harder and beat the guy. I don't have to work. You work hard for the Lord because you want to honor the Lord, but the Lord is going to give you what you need in the middle of the situation. We know about this all the time. You know, when you put your faith in something that you can't, in the God that you cannot see, you begin to see things that you cannot believe. And when you use faith as the weapon of your life, you will see victories that you knew were not possible in your own strength. Now, there's a guy named Philip Yancey. He's a writer, and he had a quote, and I saw it last week. I wanted to share it with you because it makes so much sense in the middle of this. It says, look, I have learned that faith means trusting in advance what will only make sense in reverse. Because a lot of times, like the rolling bread down the hill with Gideon, it was really cool after it's over. Before it happened, it looked really dumb. You know? And so many times the faith things in your life, God is saying, look, I've done this a billion times. Let's do it this way. And you're like, what? You want me to do what? And He's like, yeah, I want you to do that because it's going to be fun. Trust me. Watch me. It'll do it. He said, prove me. Test me. Prove me. And God gives you these crazy things to do that are always in accordance with His Word. He doesn't violate His Word with that. He says, hey, do this crazy thing. And then something miraculous comes out of it, and you're like, I don't see how that happened. And He goes, I did that. See, have faith in me. We're going to do it again. A different way. It's even cooler. And that's how it goes. That's how my whole life has been up to this point. Every time I trust the Lord, it's some weird something that doesn't make any sense, and you go with it, and then at the end of it, you're like, holy moly, look what that happens. And He's like, see, I told you. Let's do another one. Let's do it again. That's what it is. And you may think, hey, that sounds great, Jim, but you know, I know a little bit about this Christian thing, and I know that I'm supposed to be, you know, this moral person that looks nice and smells nice and nice, and I don't ever get mad at anybody and blow up. I don't do anything wrong, and I don't fail because they just seem to get, the people that really are Christians seem to have it all together and stuff. That's not the case at all. Let me share with you this about that list of guys that got in the Hall of Faith that we just, hey Adam, could you go back to that where we had those guys? Was it 30, 23, or 24? There? Yeah, dude, you're so there. Awesome. Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David. I want you to think about these guys. This is something that a commentary I read this week. I'm just going to read it from him because he did a great job with it. It says, look, John Calvin, who was a famous theologian way back, Google him, figure it out. Okay, he points out that there were defects in the faith of all of these guys. Gideon was slow to take up arms. He didn't want to do it. A little bit scared. He needed a little extra motivation. Barak hesitated. And he went forward only when Deborah, who's the prophet of the day, encouraged him. He was a little scared. Samson, he got sidetracked by a woman, by Delilah. And I don't make that all women are bad. They're not women are bad, not at all. I'm not trying to say that. But, he got sidetracked. He didn't do what God wanted him to do because he was chasing what he wanted. That's basically what I thought. And Jephthah, he made a foolish vow. And then he stubbornly kept it. I'm not going to read that story, but go Google Jephthah. Man, that's a pretty nasty, dumb vow. And it's sad. Very sad the way it ended up. So this is what John Calvin says about this. He says, in every saint, there is always to be found something reprehensible. Nevertheless, although faith may be imperfect and incomplete, it does not cease to be approved by God. You may think, I am too crappy to wield the weapon of faith. That would be great. But you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I've seen. You don't know what I've been. And I will tell you this, that does not matter. Because God can overcome all of those things. It's not a limitation. It's not that it doesn't matter. It's not that it's a limitation. It matters greatly because God wants to redeem whatever has been in you and make that worthy and valuable and to do something great in your life. It does not deter God. God doesn't pause. He's not silent. He's not, oh, well, that guy. No, that guy is the guy he wants. That's interesting. He can do something amazing with that people will go, how in the world did you do it with that guy? And if you did it with that guy, you obviously can do something with me. Because I'm not nearly as bad as that knucklehead. That's been the story of my life as well. Every one of these guys had a problem. The problem with the weapon of faith isn't found in the person who's holding it. The problem with the weapon of faith many times is found in what you put your faith in. You put your faith in yourself, I guarantee you will fail at some point. It's going to happen. You put your faith in your finances. You put your faith in the government. You put your faith in the government program. You put your faith in the goodness of people. Come on. Really? Do we know that's going to fail? At some point that's going to fail. But if you put your faith in God, the power of the faith is in who you put it in. That's why Christ said, in Matthew 17, he said, look, if you have faith the small as a mustard seed, listen to this. You can say to this mountain, you move from here to there. That's where we get, he can move mountains or things like that. Or faith as small as a mustard seed. So if you have that little, it doesn't matter how much you have because the person you have faith in is God who is limitless in power. And if you have faith that size, you can do great things. It doesn't matter because faith, the size of the faith doesn't matter when the God that you put it in is so big. Moving a mountain is a pretty uninteresting task for the God of the universe. That's pretty simple for him. But we're talking about the God that raises people from the dead. So faith as the weapon. I want to ask you something. Christian out there, are you using faith as your weapon to get through life? Or are you looking at things like I was just saying? You're saying, okay, I've got to work really hard. I've got to do my stuff. I've got to go out and conquer the fight with my fidget spinner on my own. And if I fail, I fail. And God will comfort me when it's over. Is that you? Are you just trusting what God says? And when it's time to employ the fidget spinner, okay, I'll do it. But I know who is making the difference. Is that you? Well, I want to tell you today, if you're trying to do it on your own steam with your own talents and your own stuff, you're working way too hard. So many times in leadership we tell people you need to work smarter, not harder. And this is very much the truth in faith. You need to follow Christ and just trust what he said. He tells us stuff to do in our word. We don't need to try to over-explain it. We don't need to try to overcome it. We don't need to try to explain why it doesn't happen in today's culture. Just freaking do it. That's all you got to do. Just do it. It's pretty simple. And then see what he does. Now Christians can fall into that as well. Maybe you're out there on Facebook Live, man. Maybe you're sitting there and you're going, okay, yeah, that's me. I've been working really hard. That's why I'm at home because I'm so stinking tired. I don't feel like I can get out of bed and go to church or want to devote that to my life. I don't feel like I have time to do something like that. That may be you. I don't know. But I'm telling you, you're making it way too hard if you want to follow Jesus. And it's showing up in your life and it's making it hard for you. and for those around you. So what you need to do is to trust the Lord in your life. And if you're following Jesus, that should be no-brainer. But sometimes it's not. Just like faith, we get fuzzy on faith, we get fuzzy on what following Jesus is. We fall back into old patterns that we need to be the ones doing all the work. But God does the heavy lifting, and it's meant to be that way. And maybe today you don't follow Jesus. Maybe you just showed up and you said, I'll show up. That's okay. I'll come. Somebody nagged you. You came. Rock on. Kudos to you. Glad you're here. You know? But maybe the reason you came today is because you needed to understand that faith is something, the fact that you're able to believe in something that you can't see is evidence that God is trying to get to you to help you, give you something to believe in. And He's already given that to you. And you need to take a step up where you say, look, I realize, okay, that's right. Okay, everything I've tried up to this point, there's been a failure point in it. Maybe I've gotten wise and I realize at some point I'm not supposed to make this on my own steam. It's supposed to be made with faith in God. And I need to trust in Him who sent Jesus, His Son, that we talk about. Jesus, who died on a cross. We sang about this. You know, Jesus who came and He realized that God realized that every one of us, that you hear me, everyone that hears my voice, everybody out there on Facebook Live, you're all jacked up and so am I, and it's okay. It's all right. God knew that. You're not surprising anybody. You don't have to hide that behind a mask anywhere. God knew that. It's no big deal. He's got it taken care of. And what He did was He sent Jesus, His Son, who lived, and he lived on earth as a man, and He never made a mistake. He never did anything wrong, had no sin. He was the only one that didn't deserve to die or any kind of punishment, and yet He took the punishment for everyone. And because He was so great, greater than 1 million presidents and rulers and kings all combined into one, because He was so important and so great. And as God said, as Paul says, as God said through Paul in Colossians, He's above, in front of all of creation, in front of everybody, number one. Because He was so important, His death on a cross paid the price for all of us, because that's what sin really gets you. That's what going against God gets you. It gets you death in the end. And all the enjoyment up to that, of death. And He says, look, if you'll believe in me, and you'll put your trust in me and your faith in me, and you'll follow me, that's what He says about His Son Jesus. He said, if you'll just do things my way and trust me with this, I will get you out of this in one piece, in a great way. And that's what following Jesus is. And you begin to follow life through here. And when you get to the end of life, there's one or two choices. It's hell if you don't follow Jesus. It's heaven if you do. And you get that as a bonus on the end. Because God's kingdom starts in your life right now, the minute you choose to follow Him and put Him as the most important thing in your life. And maybe some of you guys are here today, and that's got to be your choice today.
Thanks for being a part of Bay West today. Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. Please feel free to check us out at baywestchurch.org, or you can follow us on Facebook at Bay West Church.